Our Planning Applications Committee for Thursday the 9th of June. The regular chair, Keith Driver, is away on annual holiday, so as vice chair I'll be taking over for today.
Excuse me, Chair, we need to appoint the vice chair. Sorry, it's not appointed to the council.
Oh right, okay, I thought
Sorry,
I'd already
been...
So I can't nominate myself as vice chair.
Can I ask for nominees for the appointment of vice chair, please? Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So it's been moved and seconded by Councillor Sue Sands. Are there any other nominations? Then can I put that to the vote, please? Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Sands. You are now the vice chair.
Thank you very much.
Carry on with the meeting as normal.
Do we need a vice chair for this meeting? If for whatever reason I have to suddenly rush out.
If that happened, if the vice chair had to rush out, we would then do another little mini election.
Right,
but
okay.
Kind of hope that we don't have to. Have
no worries. Okay, fine. Okay, so we move on to the agenda proper. So first of all, do we have any apologies?
Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Driver, who is on leave. I believe everybody else is present, except we're waiting for Councillor Champion. Yeah, thank you. We've got several new members on the committee.
Right. Okay. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations to make concerning today's agenda? There's only 2 items, both non-controversial.
Say that.
No worries. Okay, so no declarations of interest. Minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on May the 12th, which appear on pages 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. Does anyone need to raise any matters from the minutes of the last meeting?
We don't have matters arising, it's just for accuracy, please.
Just for accuracy then? Yeah. None? Right. Okay, so the minutes are agreed. Good. Right. Okay, we can now then move on to item 5, which is the planning applications proper. And the first application is application 5A, which is on page 15 of your notes. And this is the application for Bethel Street, the old fire station, now known as Sin School, for the installation of air conditioning.
Sin School?
Yeah, Sir Isaac Newton. Teachers tend to give abbreviations to schools. Okay, so Lara, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just before we begin, we're just going to do some quick introductions for officers, for, as we've got a new committee in front of us. So my name's Lara Emerson, I'm planning team leader. I'll be presenting the applications today because the case officer is away, so I'll be covering the 2 applications today. And
for new members, I'm David Parkin, I'm the Area Development Manager. I manage the Development Control Team. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the first item, we've got an application for 30 Bethel Street, which is the Sir Isaac Newton sixth form. The application falls under two different reference numbers, so we've got a full application and we've also got a listed building consent application. The 2 applications together comprise the installation of a rooftop air conditioning unit and also the some internal works which are covered only by the listed building consent application. So the site is here. As you can see, you've got Bethel Street running at the bottom. You've got Sir Isaac Newton sixth form, which sits in the old fire station, and a number of other sort of commercial units and a police station running along Bethel Street, along with some residential units further afield. Just to put it into context, we've got an aerial view here. So this is the building in question. These are the closest residential units. And the air conditioning unit that we'll be looking at later is positioned about here. These are some photos showing existing plants that sits on the roof of the building. alongside which, in this location, the additional unit would be located. And this is looking east towards City Hall. You've got some solar panels and some plants running along the front of Bethel Street. This is a roof plan. So Bethel Street runs along the bottom here. You've got solar panels and associated plants running along the front, some existing air conditioning units here, and an additional air conditioning unit which is proposed to be placed in this location here. If you remember the location plan, the flats, which are the closest residential units, are located at the back here. This plan shows the top floor of the sixth form college. You've got an existing science lab, which is proposed to be split into 3 units. That requires the installation of 2 stud-work walls, one here and one here. And this facilitates a preparation room and 2 separate labs on either side. The air conditioning unit is proposed to serve this central unit, the central preparation room, which will be created, and the stud-work walls are subject to listed building consent, as well as the air conditioning unit. So to summarise, we've had objections from residents who are concerned about the additional noise that would be created by the air conditioning unit. They've also raised issues about odour from the air conditioning unit. We've spoken with environmental protection. Environmental protection officers are satisfied that the unit itself won't create any additional noise that would cause any sort of nuisance to residents at such a distance. And even associated with the existing plant that's there, the noise that would be created in total would be acceptable, given the distance, and also given the fact that there's a parapet on the roof which blocks a direct sight between the air conditioning unit and any windows. Air conditioning units don't lead to odour concerns because they simply remove condensated water. So there's not a concern with odour either. So there's 2 applications here. The recommendation is to approve both of them, with the full application being subject to the standard conditions plus a condition requiring the air conditioning unit to be installed using anti-vibration mountings, which will stop any additional noise being created by vibrations. And then the listed building consent application is also proposed to be recommended to be approved, subject to standard conditions plus some to prevent any damage being made to the listed building alongside the works that are proposed. Thank you.
Oh, great. Very concise. Do we have any speakers on this? Right, there are no speakers on this, so we now move on to members' questions. Do we have any questions from our committee members? Well, we have one from Councillor Peake, one from Councillor Sands. Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Chair. Just one more question. The mounting, you said it's anti-vibrant. Is that would be rubber? Because it's outside over a period of time, rubber will rot in the weather and it will perish. So I just wondered what type of mounting it will be.
Oh, I don't know the exact specification. I believe it would be to be agreed, and environmental protection would be concerned with the longevity of any such mountings, but I don't have that detail at the moment.
Probably polyurethane or something like that. Councillor Sands.
I'm interested, if you've got the information, into what the temperature currently is without the air conditioning units, what the temperature is currently within the teaching areas, having spent many years in hot classrooms. Is that what the air conditioning, I assume, is going to be used for, is going to be for learning areas? So what is the current temperature there that they feel they need to have the air conditioning?
I don't have any information about the temperature, but the room that's being proposed is a science preparation room. So we'd be expected to have some equipment that might generate heat and might need cooling down for that reason.
Thank you.
Just, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 13 it says the new unit is unlikely to increase noise to a level that will cause disturbance through an open window 25 metres away. But then later on it says that the nearest residential property is 23 metres away. What will be the effects for those people who are 23 metres away?
I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy between those, so apologies for that. But my understanding is that the Environmental Protection Officer has sort of looked at this site specifically and considered the impacts on those windows. I would imagine that if it is 23 metres, that it would also be acceptable for 23 metres.
Right. Any more questions from members? None at all. So, okay, so now we move shortly on to debate, but before we do, we need to move the approval of this motion, which I approved, or I proposed. Do we have a seconder for this?
Chair, we've got 2 applications here.
Oh, 2 applications. Should we move them both at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, so the applications are for changes to the fabric of the building and the installation of air conditioning. So I propose both of those that be accepted. We have seconders.
I've got Councillor Sam. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
Right, okay, that's been approved. So now we move on to debate. Does anyone have anything they wish to raise concerning this? Councillor Davis.
Thank you. So where the 2 new walls are going into the science lab, effectively, is obviously it's a grade 2 listed building. Are these going to likely to cause any damp problems? I just wondered, I can understand that it's going to be generating extra heat because it's in the science lab, but what will be the effects on the building in terms of air circulation and possible damp?
So we're still on questions, Vice Chair.
Yeah, that's a question rather than debate, but we'll deal with that anyway. Yeah.
I don't have any specific information about the methodology for the stud work that they're proposing, but I'm sure they would have considered that in their specification. Design and Conservation Officer is satisfied that the works that are proposed to the inside and the outside are not going to cause harm to the building. So, yeah.
It's worth noting that stud walls can be removed as well as installed. So, do we have any more? Councillor Thomas.
Just, it is a planning application, it's not retrospective, it's an advance.
No, it's a planning application, yeah.
Just to thank Inspiration Trust for putting it in advance.
All right.
Not a retrospective one.
No, not like some things we've heard of recently. Okay, so no more debate to be had, so we can move on to the vote on this nice quick application. So the recommendation is to approve. Those who wish to approve, first of all, the installation of the air conditioning unit itself, please show.
Members, I'll just have a look to make sure that. I think that's unanimous, Chair.
And secondly, those who wish to approve the changes to the fabric of the building by the installation of the stud walls, please show your hands.
Again, that's unanimous, Chair.
Right, oh, good, well done. So that is passed. We now move on to the second item, the page of which I've lost for the moment, which appears on page 29 of your notes. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, the second application, item 5B, is application 22001-134F for 27 Beatrice Road, and it's a single-storey side extension and installation of rear dormer, and it was called in by a ward councillor. So are you doing this again, Lara?
Thank you, Chair. So the application that we're considering now is for a site at 27 Beatrice Road. This is the site here. As you can see, it's a terraced property sitting on the east side of Beatrice Road with a long, thin garden stretching to the rear. This is an aerial view showing the site sitting in the centre of the terrace with the garden stretching to the east. We've got a very sloped site here, as you'll see from the photos, so the rear of the gardens is on much higher land than the houses themselves. This is the rear of the site. This is number 27. And this is the area here which is proposed to be infilled with an extension, along with a dormer on the rear roof slope. So moving back into the garden, again looking at the property here and its association with the surrounding terrace. And again, stepping even further back, you can see from this photo how steep the garden is. And standing at the back of the garden, you get a much more elevated view of the rear of the terrace of houses.
Sorry to interrupt. You can't see what we can see, can you?
Oh, goodness.
I have no concept of
It looks great on my screen.
It is very difficult.
Do you want the blind lowered so that we
I don't know
can?
if that would, but I just don't have any sense that the garden is higher. I don't see it in context at all. I mean, okay, I don't, possibly can't do anything today, but perhaps at some point we could actually have this presentation put on our laptop so we don't have this. But the most important thing to me is to see these photos.
Well, that's better.
That is much better.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It's just the
Is everybody all right with the
conditions,
lights on?
really.
Yes.
That is better, thank
I
you.
hadn't appreciated that it was so different. So hopefully in this photo you can see the garden is here in the foreground, and then you've got the rear of the terrace of properties on lower ground in front of you. And this is the subject property in the centre of the photo. The proposal is for a rear extension, a side extension, infilling that area that I identified earlier. That's shown here. Some alterations to the existing rear outcrop, single-storey rear outcrop, in terms of materials and windows, and also the installation of a dormer on the rear roof slope. The proposals are close to being permitted developments. It should be noted that the reason that the rear dormer, for instance, needs planning permission is simply because the materials do not match the existing dwelling. The reason that the rear extension needs planning permission is because the materials do not match the existing dwelling, and it's also slightly too long to be permitted development. This is a plan here. So on the left-hand side of this sheet of plans, you can see the existing ground floor just here, and this is the proposed ground floor. So in yellow, you can see the ground floor extension that is proposed to infill that area. This is the existing first floor, which is not proposed to change. And then you've got the proposed second floor, which includes the installation of the dormer and the creation of a bedroom in the roof space. So the application has attracted a number of objections. During the course of the application, there have been some quite significant negotiations, and the proposals have been significantly scaled back as a result of negotiations with officers. There was at one point a two-storey rear extension being proposed here. That's now gone from the plans entirely, and the revised plans have been consulted on. At the time of the writing of the report, we hadn't received many comments from neighbours on the revised plans, but you'll see in the updates report that we've received a number since publication of the report. We've received a number of letters of support for the proposals, and we've also received a further 8 letters of objection. 2 of them are from new contributors and 6 are from existing contributors. The comments that have been raised are summarised in the updates report, but essentially relate to amenity primarily. The recommendation for the application in its current form is to approve, subject to the standard conditions, and also some conditions recommending that we agree materials prior to their use, simply because there's not an awful lot of information contained here. It's clear that a sort of a more contemporary design is being proposed, and we just want to have a check to see that those materials are of high quality. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Do we have any speakers on this?
Yes, Chair, we do. Sarah Bates, Tom Gordon and Emma Black on behalf of the applicants.
Right, so who's got time allocation? 3 minutes?
They each have 3 minutes, but Eleanor will have up to 6 minutes, but I don't think you want to use all that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have some speakers on this. Our first speaker is Sarah Bates. So Sarah, if you'd like to come forward and right, Sarah, when you've got yourself ready, you have 3 minutes. Sarah, can you just pull the microphone a little bit closer, please? Yeah, that's better.
I'll start again.
Yep, please.
Okay. Comments refer to the effect on immunity and liveliness of 29 British Road, where I've lived for 24 years, and also to the immunity of nearby residents. Other points include water runoff. Externally, numbers 27 and 29 retain their original Victorian form, and the Norwich local plan says that the proposal should respect and enhance character and their distinctiveness. Terrace houses involve shared environment and mutual consideration. At no time did the applicant inform myself on the neighbours of their proposal, something which is recommended in Norwich Council advice to help with exemptions to houses. National Planning Policy Framework also says applicants should work closely with those affected by the proposals and council views. At 2.55 metres, the coast side extension would be 20 centimetres higher than the existing on the east side and 7 centimetres higher than the existing fence. At 1.7 metres from the side of the house, sliders would be effective in all the rooms. The narrow area formed between my house and the proposal would adversely affect the community both within the house and outside of my yard, which are sailing. The local plan emphasises the need for regard to potential impacts on community activities and maintaining the lighting outlook for existing occupiers. The City Council advice that emphasises the importance of maintaining space between houses, avoiding tunnel effects and ensuring adequate light. The advice note also states that surrounding neighbourhood impact must be taken into account and that design and materials should match rhythms as closely as possible. Development will be seen by many from neighbouring and hillside gardens. In design, it's out of character of the houses and contrary to the advice note, it's always prominent and these are not related to existing features. With regard to the local plan, proposed materials do not suit the reserve to be permanent. Planners is recommending existing fence be retained and renewal built against it. Would this be possible with the nature of the fence and proposals footings? An original gully sited below the existing fence takes excess surface water from both sides, which slope down towards the houses. If removed, the water will run under the houses causing damp. Officers report there is no evidence this will happen, but experience shows it's very likely to. The local plan states that mitigation measures for surface water runoff, including where it affects others, should be incorporated into further proposals. Regarding proposed petition and boiler, a creation of tubal discharge into a narrow yard where permissions will be trapped. Parts of the plan also support appear contrary to the Council's advice on labour impact. Paragraph 32, applicants' interests are prioritised by those of other residents, i.e. positive and enhanced outcome of the applicant but unacceptable impact on immunity for long-term residents. Paragraph 24, public concern is valued above that of neighbours. Impact is only behind houses and therefore acceptable. But the City Council advice note says there must be careful consideration of how an extension dates within the street while keeping to the front aspect in public. Finally, paragraph 29 states the side extension will only affect immunity for number 29, implying that this is insignificant. And also, the proposal is not excessive. Its height and proximity to where doors and windows suggest otherwise. Also, the extension would be seen by other residents in the industry.
Well done, you've finished within your 3 minutes, so that's good. Thank you very much. Our second speaker is that Mr. Gordon? Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. I should point out, as you probably surmised, that I'm a neighbour of Sarah's, lived there 30 years. It's interesting that the officer's report emphasises what integrity is to be found in Beatrice Road. It's one of the few streets where porches have not been built on the front elevation, where original windows remain, and various other features give it some kind of unity and intent. At the back of the terrace, this is far from the case. Looking along the street from a very elevated position like Gully, it looks a bit of a mess. There are extensions of 1 story, 2 stories, no stories. And overall, we feel that there's been too much done at the back of the streets to change the original character and dare one say the original charm of the street. But I want to go on to say to support Sarah in 2 areas. One is about the Victorian Gully. We had one at the back of our house at number 13, and in recent weeks, even as recently as last week, torrential rain led to an inch or 2 of water in our yard. Without the gully, and without the gully at the back of Sarah's house, the water will get into her rear sitting room. The other thing is about the amenity of the occupants in number 27. As has been mentioned, we've got enormous gardens at the back of our houses. I'm not sure that everybody's had an idea of how extensive it can be. But for most of us, the best part of the house is what I would call the patio, perhaps more vulgarly the yard, at the back of the house, which is extensive. And most of us, as you can see from the plan, is a sizable level area. Most of us have that area full of pot plants, shrubs, benches, very amenable amenity. If this extension of ground level is built, the occupants of number 27 will be left with an area at ground level measuring about 2 meters by 5, which I think is inadequate. We also face, as all the residents along their face, the steep stairs up to the remainder of the gardens. I don't think even the photographs you saw earlier gave an idea of the height. At the top of these gardens, where they meet the fences of Primrose Road, one is standing at the height of the ridge of the house. So it's an extraordinary stretch of land, which upon time, I believe was actually allotments or even open lands. So for many residents, the crucial part is the yard.
I'll have to interrupt you there. You've had your 3 minutes, but I think you've got your message across very, very clearly and eloquently.
One quick further
Just one sentence.
Would it be possible for the council to have a look at the site, as most of you are perhaps unfamiliar with?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we now have,
We have Eleanor Black, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant.
and she has 6 minutes.
She has up to 6
Yeah. Eleanor. Speaking on behalf of the applicant, we've had 2 objectors with 3 minutes each, so you get a total of 6 minutes.
Thank you for taking the time to consider our application, and thank you to the case officers who made an excellent case for approval. It's not necessary to repeat their findings, so we just wanted to briefly summarise matters from our point of view, the applicant's point of view, I'm speaking on behalf of. Firstly, the applicants want to make it clear that they are very flexible when it comes to materials. This is not an issue whatsoever. Subject to that, everything else, apart from the side extension, as we've heard, is permitted development. And in terms of that side extension, the case officer report ultimately says that the proposals are considered to be acceptable in terms of impact on neighbour immunity. We think it's also important to note that the committee was called on the basis of the original scheme. Those original plans were drastically scaled back, as we've heard, and the first floor extension was removed entirely and the glazing was significantly reduced. The planning officer has dealt with all of the objections and is improving the revised application. We think it's worth noting that the applicants contacted Councillor Price to ask to revoke the calling in of our application, given that the original reasons for the committee no longer existed. Councillor Price confirmed that the reason the committee was still going ahead was the 2 residents requested and it did. Finally, just to reiterate some of the planning portal messages and support, there is a housing crisis. Young people cannot afford homes to live in. This is everyone's problem. It's not nothing to do with you just to support of house that pays to go. We do appreciate the importance people attach to their homes, particularly somewhere they've lived for a long time. But any extension is always going to have a minor impact on residents. Objecting to a modest extension like this sets a really dangerous precedent, and the lack of compromise demonstrated by some of the objectors during this process has been really disappointing. That's it for me. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, within your 6 minutes. Okay, we have no more speakers. Okay, we have no more speakers on this, so we now move on to questions from members. Do we have any questions from members here? Councillor Stukeley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we've got a ground floor extension that is, as you say, beyond community development measurements. Can you just reiterate and comment on how much or how little that will impact the residents, particularly at 29, please?
Yep, sure. So the proposal is for, let me just get the measurements up, that'll help me. Okay, so the single storey extension, if I get the plans up, this will help. It currently stands at a height of 2.5 metres, a width of 1.9 and a depth of 3.9. The permitted development rights would allow it to be extended up to 3 metres. This is 3.9, so it goes nearly a metre beyond the amount it would be required under permitted development rights. That being said, there is a further permitted development right called prior approval for larger home extensions that would allow it to go up to 6 metres. That would be subject to a neighbour consultation, and if there were any objections under that form of application, we would have to consider amenity. So essentially, they would be able to do 3 metres without any consultation with us. Anything beyond that, and we would need to be involved, and we would likely consider amenity in this case.
Councillor Bogolan.
Also, can I, on the back of it, can I just ask what would happen if this wasn't approved? So they could either build to the 3 metres anyways. Let's say they want to keep the plans as they are. Would that then go to you for prior approval, or is that an option that is then no longer on the table because it has already been turned down by the planning committee?
They could use that route. They could use the prior approval route under that scheme. But as I say, it would go through a neighbour consultation process. If we received objections, we would consider amenity. So essentially, we'd be back in the same situation.
Yeah, but you've already received objections. You've considered them and still have recommended for approval. So would it? I mean, is that a foregone conclusion, basically?
In this case, if we were to be considering, it would depend on the decision that was made today, somewhat, because we would have to bear in mind the council's decision at that point.
Can I just kind of add to that? Just for clarification, the permitted the length of the extension under permitted development is 3 metres. They'd be able to do that with no reference to us at all, regardless of whatever decision is made at this committee today. Those permitted development rights remain intact. I think your question, so I'm reinterpreting it for you to make sure I got it right, was about the prior approval process. Yeah, and in which case we would still need to receive representations on that prior approval application. I think one of the reasons why this is come before committee is not necessarily about the length and the physical size of it, but it's about the materials.
Yeah.
So, because one of the requirements for prior approval is that the materials match the existing house, and these don't.
So what do we actually make a decision on then? Do we make a decision on the whole application, or do we make a decision only on the part that requires actual planning approval?
You're making a decision on everything that is before you today because an application has been submitted, therefore you're entitled to do that. I think the reason why we're referring back to permitted development rights is that they're a fallback essentially.
Yeah.
between what can be done without coming to this committee and what can't be done. But you're making a decision on the impact of this application today. Hold it.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Could we see where the gully is on the plans, please, and the length of it?
So my understanding is that the gully runs in between the two properties here. I'm looking to neighbours to see if they are agreeing with me.
Is it on the side of 27?
Yes, between the two properties, yeah.
But on the fence side of 27 where the new wall will be?
Yes.
Or, yeah, okay.
Right, we had another question from, I'm sorry, Councillor Graham, my apologies.
I'd like to know where you draw the line about what's acceptable and what isn't, because losing the light from your yard and having an increase of your yard and your living room flooding is not negligible, in my view. And if that's a risk to the neighbour, then I would be inclined to want to limit that impact. So I'm wondering, why is that acceptable? Even if I mean, that's quite a big impact on one household. Whereas the impact of us saying, no, you have to stay within the development rights is still impact on the family that wants to extend, but perhaps not quite so much. It's great to hear that they're flexible enough and will use matching materials, because that's an important part of the historic street community. But yeah, so where do we draw the line about what's acceptable and what isn't?
So in response to your question, I would just have in your mind the fact that anything beyond permitted, so the permitted development rights would allow them to build an extension up to approximately here. I'm estimating that is about 0.9 metres shorter than it is currently. In my mind, it is important to consider whether the additional 0.9 metres in length is going to have a significant impact beyond that length, bearing in mind that the neighbour will have a similar window arrangement to this, in that they'll have one window sitting on the back of the rear room, and then they'll have some side windows running alongside, and cutting the extension down by 0.9 metres is unlikely to have a significant unlikely to lead to a significant improvement to their levels of light in those rooms or outlook.
Councillor Thomas, and then Councillor Stookley.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're looking at this application and all the applications at the moment, but this is not unique, I would have thought. This kind of development exists across the city, as I understand it. It certainly is. I've seen it. So how successful is that? I mean, have these objections been listed before?
So as you say, we need to consider this application on its merits and consider this particular situation. You're right that we do receive a lot of these types of infill extensions because these types of houses are very common in Norwich. But we don't necessarily need to go into too much detail about the success or otherwise of those, because we need to be considering this particular one.
Councillor Stookley, and then Councillor Lubbock.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. So going back to the side extension, are the eaves height within the permitted development measurements, and is it a flat roof? And also regarding the gully, which is also a concern to residents at 29, is it possible to condition the development to ensure that runoff is directed away from the house?
So in response to your first question, the height of the eaves at the adjacent to the neighbouring property is 2.55 metres, which I believe is in permitted development rights, and it is a flat roof indeed. That's about as low as you can realistically get on a single storey extension. And that's something that we always look to keep at a very minimum level for these types of applications because of the close quarters of the properties, and that is the lowest we can realistically get them to be brought down in any circumstance. With regards to surface water drainage, so in this particular case, we're not in a critical drainage area here. If we were, we would be seeking to controlled runoff and get some details about how they were going to reduce runoff. But because we're not, our policies don't require any consideration of surface water in this case, and it would be more of a building control matter for the underground drainage to ensure that there was capacity and that it was suitably built.
Thank you. So what you're saying there is that building control will look after that particular element.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Lubbock.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We heard from one of the speakers that so much change has taken place at the back of the properties already, and it looks a bit of a mishmash. Can I ask you, in your experience, having looked at the back of the houses, this map doesn't actually, the plan doesn't actually show it, but would you agree that certain properties, say for number we have 33 and numbers 17 and 19 have already built across the rear of the properties to take in all of the courtyard area?
Yeah, I mean, it looks as though that is true from this plan, which this aerial view. You can see there are a number of various types of alterations along the back of the property, including dormers and rear infill extensions. So essentially, the same proposals that we're considering here. Yeah.
Sorry, could we just go back through the plan because I don't think members could actually see it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So this aerial view here shows a view of the terrace properties, and you can see that there are various alterations across the terrace. And yeah, you pointed out number 33, which appears to have exactly the same development we're considering here.
So, I mean, the point was that there's a precedent being set, and neighbours are living with that sort of extension already.
Do we have any more questions from members? Did I see Councillor Graham's hand go up a moment ago?
I was thinking about it, thinking in terms of if this is a street that floods regularly. Okay, it floods on the road, and it's been largely resolved by deep gully cleaning. I'm trying to understand the impact.
Can I just, are you raising a debate here, or do you have a question?
I'm trying to understand the impact of the gully, so it's a question.
Right, okay.
I mean, beyond what I've said, I'm not really sure what I can add. But the gully itself is remaining in place, and the capability of that gully to take any additional runoff will be a consideration for building control.
Councillor Sands.
For my total ignorance, could you explain to me what the gully is and how it works?
The gully is a Victorian system that runs in between the two properties that helps to deal with any surface water that drains in that area.
So it's sort of like a ditch, is that correct, or a drain?
A drain. It will have a cover on it, I would imagine. Yeah.
I have a question here myself, actually, or two questions. First of all, does the gully carry water away out of that sort of little courtyard area between the two houses, or does it drain down close to the buildings? And secondly, the fall of the roof on the proposed extension, does the fall go in a short direction down towards the sides towards the gully, or does it go down the length of the extension away from the main building?
I don't know the answer to your question, I'm afraid, but I know that the guttering will be inset within the existing roof, I would imagine that that means that it runs away from the house lengthways towards the garden, towards the property's own garden. But I'm just guessing.
Right, okay.
Sorry, can I come back on that? I think the important thing to consider when you're thinking about drainage is the nature of the existing surfaces and the amount of kind of additional hard surfacing that this proposal will add. I think that there was a picture, that one. If you look at the character of the spaces between the properties and the existing areas there, they're pretty much covered in hard surfacing, so they're impermeable. They're already generating kind of surface water runoff. The extension is covering over some of that existing hard surface with more hard surface, but at a higher level. So the kind of net increase in hard surface area as a result of the application is negligible. So in terms of actually the capacity of the drainage, I get the feeling that one of the issues is about whether or not the drain will become clogged as a result of this proposal. But effectively, it won't be dealing with any more surface water than it is at the moment. And I think that's an important point to remember.
Councillor Graham, you've already had a question. Is it related to the one that you asked before, or is it something new?
It's yes to both. It's something. I'm just wondering if we have the option of requiring a green roof that would help to absorb some of that runoff and actually improve the situation.
Is it supported by what was Okay, so we couldn't necessarily require there to be a green roof, considering that doesn't fit with the development that they proposed. We could require them to install water butts. There are certain policies that generally talk about sustainable surface water runoff. This isn't in a critical drainage area. We wouldn't normally require it, but it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to apply it in this case.
Councillor Sands.
Yes, water butts was always up for them. Would it be possible, given that drainage, big discussion here today, to ask if they can put in permeable? I know you get, driveways and that these days. When you want to put in a driveway, it has to be permeable, doesn't it, for water? So at the back there, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's concrete, maybe it's pavers. And that's something that the water can pour through. And I know you can get paving stones these days that water does go through. So I don't think you can have a driveway built out without one.
I think Councillor Sands is suggesting a soakaway of some description.
Yeah, some kind of, yeah.
So above and beyond the development that's being proposed, we can't extend our reach to talk about the rest of the property in this case. Okay. So it wouldn't be reasonable for us to ask them to make any changes to the rest of the site. We can only deal with the development that's being proposed here.
But building regs would deal with those sorts of things anyway. Right, okay. No more questions. Okay, the recommendation is to approve, so I propose that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Vaughan. We now move into the area of debate. Does anyone have anything they wish to raise there? Councillor Stookley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think there is an amenity issue here, but largely it is with the extension that would be allowed under permitted development. So, given that on balance, I think I'm going to vote in favour of this, but it's set that there is an amenity issue that would be in place regardless of whether we do or not. Thank you.
Councillor Bogolan.
I'm exactly in the same situation. I find this very difficult because if you would ask me whether this is an extension that I would approve, no, I wouldn't. But I mean, pragmatically, it is something that in one form or another will go through under permitted development. So it is a very difficult one. I'm not entirely clear if I might not fall on the other side of the coin and say, because I don't think it's an acceptable extension, I will vote against it, knowing that they can come back under permitted development. So, you know, I think either, it's a very difficult one, either argument can be logically made, I think.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Davis.
Yes, I agree. I think the the only thing is that if it comes back under permitted development, that it can't be conditioned at all. So I think at least now, you know, we can look at water butts and various other things. I think it is a shame, and I do think it's going to be awful for the neighbours. But if we say no today, we don't have a chance to condition it, and it will just be built anyway under permitted development without coming to planning.
Right. Councillor Sands.
Just going back to something Councillor Lovick said about precedents set along the Google Maps and have a look before I came today, and there is a lot of development plans. I'm kind of feeling like we can't now say to these people you can't do it when there's so much along there already, and what kind of reasons could we give for not allowing the development if it's already not along there?
Mm-hmm. And keeping in mind that if it was refused today, they went away, all they'd have to do is cut 3 feet or 900 millimetres off the length of the extension, and it would be totally within permitted development. We've had a suggestion today that we can apply a condition to install water butts of some description to provide some mitigation. If we refuse it, then we miss out on any such conditions. So does anyone have any other points they wish to raise?
Just wondering if we need a motion to require those conditions if we're going to agree. Because what I'm hearing is we're not actually agreeing with this good idea, we're agreeing because we can make it less bad if we agree to it, then going ahead with the development conditions. So if we're going to agree to it, can I suggest that do we need a motion to put those conditions?
So you're making that as a proposal that we include water mitigation in the form of water butts?
Yes, and also, like, we can't insist on a green roof, but we should perhaps offer that as an option.
We can't do that, but
we can't require it. But if they would rather do a green roof than water butts, then it would be good if they had that option. So if we say we're insisting on water mitigation, and let them choose which one they do, or possibly do both.
I don't think we can insist on that, make that a condition, but we can have a proposal that we include water butts. So that's the way I see the situation. Councillor Lubbock.
Yeah.
Sorry. My apologies.
Could I just come back on that point? I think that the implications of you need to determine the application that's before you. Attaching a condition that would require them to do a green roof runs the risk of significantly altering the proposal because there's more weight in the structure that you have to put on, and it's. I mean, I also think probably a green roof is a disproportionate reaction to the issues this raises. Water butts is far easier to accommodate within the general parameters of the scheme that you've got in front of you. I mean, what you could do is you could minute that you would actually prefer them to use a green roof, but I don't think we could actually condition them that to use a green roof. That would mean they'd have to come back with a fresh application.
All right, Councillor Lubbock first of all, Councillor Sands.
I think it's worth noting that this application has already been scaled back. I mean, the applicant wanted far more, but has scaled it back with help from the planning officer. So I think it's rather onerous to put on them other conditions. And, you know, as we say, it's 3 metres is within permitted development rights, and I think that the little extra is helpful to the applicant and wouldn't make a lot of difference to the neighbours. These sorts of extensions are badly needed for people who can't afford to move homes or change homes, and I think we have to sort of balance the two. This is a single-storey extension, after all, and as for the rain, I mean, I had 3 inches in my driveway the other day. I mean, we are experiencing experiencing exceptional downpours. They last a short while and then they go. I mean, I have to do something so that the water doesn't get into my garage when it happens. I think I've got adequate drainage, but when you get these downpours, nothing seems adequate. So I think we're just going on somebody's hearsay. There was a lot of water the other day when it rained. Yes, there was, but you know, why are we piling on this individual the idea of putting a green roof when we don't? It's not in our policies, is it? I mean, I think water ducts are easy to install and they are useful and they do capture a lot of water. But I don't think we should insist on anything else. And when I say I think the applicants have already made concessions to what they originally wanted in deference to their neighbours.
Councillor Sands.
Sorry, just a point of clarification, sorry for jumping in here, but what, I'm assuming it's not a green painted roof. Could somebody clarify it for me, please?
It's basically a roof with vegetation on it, which actually captures the water and reduces the rate of runoff.
Like a hollow roof.
Yeah.
It's very heavy.
Councillor Peake.
As it's been stated, drainage is already there. So why is there a need for water pumps if the drainage is there and it works already?
I see your point there, Councillor Peake, but you know,
Can we deal with the motion?
yeah,
Well,
we do have a motion
can I
to.
just hang on? You've on the table at the moment. You've got a motion to approve the recommendations, but there has been some further discussion about that, the addition of an extra condition,
Which is the water
to
butts.
ask for water butts, but that has not been formally moved, and it hasn't been it hasn't been formally moved, and it hasn't been seconded. It's been suggested that it's different, and that you've had a discussion about it. It has not yet been formally moved or seconded.
Yeah, I was going to ask Councillor Graham, did she want to put that as a motion or a proposal?
Yes, I'll formally move that water butts or other mitigation are required.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Beatrice Road floods, that's fact, it's not just hearsay.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder for that?
Excuse me, we don't have anything in the report about flooding that is pertinent to this issue, do we?
We don't know, but
Excuse me, got in the lights.
we do have, I mean, your own anecdotal thing of your own property, but and we all know that heavy rainfall occurs. But the proposal is, do we wish to formally approve proposed water butts in this proposal? And I've asked, do we have a seconder for that? And it's a case of simply voting on that. Yes?
Councillor Bogerline seconding.
Okay, so we vote on the proposal that we include water butts as a condition in this. So we're voting just on that for the moment. So do we agree that the property could and should have water butts to act as mitigation for future runoff? So that's what we're voting on.
Thank you. So that
Water butts or other mitigation.
No, just water butts.
she did move other mitigation.
Oh, other mitigation. Okay.
Okay. So hands up for that. Sorry, that was unanimous.
Wasn't quite
I'm going to have
unanimous.
to look. No, it's councillor. Okay, it's going to be a recorded vote then, please. Thank you. So it's Councillor Sands, Mike, Councillor Bogerline, Councillor Davis, Councillor Stukeley, Councillor Susans, Councillor Graham, Councillor Young, Councillor Thomas, Vivian, and Thomas Vaughan.
And those against?
Against, Councillor Peake. And abstaining,
And abstaining.
Councillor
Lubbock.
Lubbock.
Right.
Sorry,
Okay.
Thank you. So that amendment has now been carried and is part of the recommendations. It's included with the recommendations.
Okay, so now we can move on to the vote for the primary application, which is to approve. Those who would like to vote to approve this application, please show your hands.
I'm going to change the seating arrangement. So it's a recorded vote. So that's councillors Mike Sands, Councillor Bogerline, Councillor Davis, Councillor Lubbock, Councillor Peake, Councillor Stookley, Councillor Sue Sands, Councillor Viv Thomas, and Councillor Vaughan Thomas.
And against? And abstentions?
Abstentions?
2 abstentions.
Are councillors, Graham and Councillor Young.
Right, so that is carried, that application is approved, which
concludes the business.
Draws us to the end of our agenda and concludes the business, and I'd like to thank everyone, including those in the public gallery, for attending today.